and representing a company called Multi-Pure, which in my opinion sells the highest quality filters that I've ever come across. And Natural Action is going to start to take the standpoint of trying to emulate the highest quality spring water that can be provided. And towards the very end of the year, or early 2020, we'll be adding some mineral supplements that are also considered to be some of the best in the world. And as far as improving water and making it functional, which means a biological improvement, that's where the brand's going to be looking to go, as one-stop shop for the best water you can get for the most affordable price. And with that, I would like to welcome Joe Borowy. How you doing, Joe?
Hey, doing good. It's great to be here.
All right. Why don't you tell everybody what condition you're at, and then a little bit brief summary about your life and how you led up to this, from when you were a kid to when you were fully identified with the condition, and what you've gone through, and how you evolved into really focusing on water as an important part of the quality of your life, essentially.
Yeah. One of your dealers, Holland Franklin, she's on tonight, become a friend, and sent me a video of another guy who, kind of like me, started dialysis in his 20s, and said a lot of things that I never thought about. But looking back when I was a child, makes a lot of sense. I was, tired all the time. And when I had sleepovers with my friends, I would always be the first one asleep. And I remember trying like so hard to stay up, because, my friends were over and I wanted to stay up late like them. And I could never fight it out past like 9:30 p.m. And they would all be joking about me and jumping on me at night. And I would be, out like a rock. I just thought that was normal. Having heard another guy that's similar to me, as far as he's sensitive energetically and, is very conscious. He was like that too, even though he didn't start dialysis. His kidneys didn't fail until his mid-20s, like me. So what, for me, I would say, this has been affecting me my whole life. But if you would have asked me up until I was on dialysis, I would have just, told you I was totally normal. One big turning point in my life, having to do with, it's kind of related to that, and I think you'll see the connection, was when I was like 18. I was walking through a bookstore and didn't even need to be in the bookstore. I was just passing from one parking lot to the next, and the easiest way was to cut through the store. And I walked by a booth, or like a corner display, and there was a book on there that said "Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know About" by Kevin Trudeau. And I'd never heard of him or I didn't know anything about it, but it just like was one of those things that just jumped at me, and I just impulse bought it, and was the first book I ever voluntarily, like not for school or something, read cover to cover. And it just made total sense to me. It talked about the medical industry, the FDA, the connection between the food industry, the drug industry, and the health insurance industry, and how the FDA is run by people primarily who come from one of those industries, primarily the drug industry. They leave, they go to the FDA, work for 5 years, and then they come back to the drug industry. And it was all about natural health. It emphasized eating organic, doing cleanses, vitamin supplements. And it was just like a whole new world to me. I didn't even know that stuff existed. This was like 2006, 2007. Now this is like normal stuff. And I think debatably, because of that book, primarily because, that book sold over 10 million copies, started driving the demand for those kind of products. But back then, when I got into this stuff, everyone, my family and friends included, thought it was absolutely bonkers. And out of everything in that book, for some reason, what just, it's like you read, there's like 100 things suggested in that book. And, for whatever reason, some of them stick with you more than others. But the idea of that filth water, or that that tap water is really filthy and you should never drink it. And shower water is really filthy and you should never, bathe in unfiltered shower water. It just clicked with me and made total sense. And I didn't know anything about that stuff at the time. So I just started getting online and ordering stuff and trying things out. And, over a few years, I bought and tested a number of systems, and got so interested in that stuff. For some, like, I could really feel a difference when I drank filtered water versus unfiltered water. And I noticed that some I got that effect more than others. And at the time, there was a company. They're not around anymore in the U.S., but there was a company called the Wellness Filter. If anyone's been in the water scene for a while, you might remember them. But they were a combination filter, and then after the filter, they had these layers of like magnetite and various volcanic minerals. And allegedly, these stones came from Japan, a lot of them, where these were used in health spas and hospitals and stuff to treat the water because they do something energetically to the water beyond the physical. Like, yes, they add minerals and stuff, but they do something beyond that, which they said made the water molecules smaller and easier to assimilate. And I bought that unit and I could feel a difference between that and a regular filter. For years, that was my only concept of kind of water that was filtered and then something beyond filtered that made it better. Because at the time, I never heard of structured water. I mean, I know now that it was around, but not so much in the U.S. And it was just sparse at that time. It wasn't like it is now. It's kind of emerging now, which is really exciting to me. So that was my beginning of both filtered water and something beyond filtration that enhances the quality of water. And so I became a dealer for a few water filter companies and had some not so good experiences with a few of those companies. And then eventually I found MultiPure and just loved everything about it. And the quality was so much higher than anything else I had used. The science behind it I felt was just on another level with NSF certification, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point tonight. But it just took all the speculation or debate out of, does your filter really do this or not? And there's a lot of uh, misinformation out there about water filters and what they can actually do. And it's really easy to mislead people into telling them a filter does something and then paying a lab a little bit of money to fabricate a test protocol to make it look like it does. Like, for example, you can make it look like it takes out a certain contaminant if you test 1 liter of spiked water on a brand new filter. I mean, you can make it look like it takes out 99.9% of arsenic, for example, but it's a useless test because in real life you're not filtering 1 gallon of water or 1 liter of water, and not water that only has arsenic spiked in it and has probably a lot of other stuff in it too. And you need to know, will it, a lot of stuff will come out in a brand new filter that will only come out for a few gallons, and then after that it's not removing that at all, or it's removing it at a very like low level. So the testing that we do at MultiPure is just so much higher than anything else out there. That combined with everything's in the USA. I had a bad experience with another really popular water filter company out there that if any of you have seen the water filter, seen it all, I'm sure you've seen this one. It's a gravity fed system, very popular. And man, product failure. I was selling them product failure. Someone called me and said, "Hey, I bought your filter. My water tastes like chemicals." I mean, I came to find out they're not even made in the USA, and there was a total recall. I didn't know about it somehow as a dealer. Um, so I've gone through the ropes a little bit with water filtration, and with MultiPure, I just think they're a great company. The value proposition is as far as like the quality you get for the price. I haven't seen anything else that comes close. It's a family owned company. I've personally met that family. I've met a lot of the high executives in the company. Just a really easy company to do business with. And in talking with Jonathan over the last couple months and that led up to this presentation tonight, we're both in agreement that we both feel that the best case scenario for water is like fresh spring water right out of the spring. But it's just not practical for 99% of people. I mean, I have been to somebody's house that has like an artesian well with flawless water, tastes like Fiji, just coming right out of his spigots. But that's incredibly rare. So for everyone else, we're trying to take the water we have and get it as close as possible to like the best spring water. And Jonathan and I are both in agreement that filtration and structuring are a big part of that. Um, so that's what we wanted to talk about tonight. I'm really, you know, I would say I have a major in filtration and a minor in structuring. I have tried a lot of stuff over the years as far as structuring goes. And I really like the NAT products. But that's how I got started. It was really just like I read a book, something resonated with me. I just started buying and testing. And then I got so interested in it, I started selling them. And then eventually that led me to being with MultiPure exclusively. Now I have health issues. I'm on dialysis. And the irony of that is, if you know anything about the body, the kidney is kind of the body's internal water filter. So for whatever, what is that made me so interested in them out of all the things in that book? uh, just intuitively. And then years later, I had problems with my own water filter. It's kind of interesting, I think, and I feel like the filtration is kind of part of my calling in that sense, because in the world, I'm sure some of you have noticed this, like in the world of structured water, I feel like a lot of people really overlook the importance of filtration, or they're just using something like, somebody recommended them without even really doing their homework. And that's kind of the niche I try to fill is, there's a lot to know about filtration. It's not super complicated. NSF certification, I think, makes it really easy to see like what's good and not good in a filter. Uh, but it's an important thing, and I just think it's really overlooked in this kind of emerging space of structured water. And Jonathan feels the same way, and that was kind of the basis of this interaction tonight.
Well, let's just hit on that from a common sense standpoint really quick. So, there is a lot of support with colloidalism and the behavior and charge characteristic with structured water surrounding, what I try and refer to for sake of deeper physics as a saturated charge, meaning there's disorder in the charge, which is what identifies an aggressive pathogen versus a symbiotic pathogen. And we've tried to cover some of this from a musical theory, physical perspective in earlier webinars, and we'll still hit on it as we learn to simplify and develop. But the bottom line is okay, let's just say, you got mechanical filtration in the body, and we know it's not all about energy, period. We know that energy is the foundation of matter, but we also know that relatively we exist in a physical world where matter matters. I mean, that's what makes this opportunity from a spiritual perspective what it is that things are very tangible and slowed down to a discernible level where there's solids and liquids, and then there is this other version that supersedes it all. That's great. But from a filtration perspective, even if we can nullify charge and surround it completely, you're still putting a bunch of stuff in your body that your liver and your kidneys primarily have to filter out that has no use to the body. So look at it like dirt in an air filter of a car. The energy of the air may be better, but if the filter clogs up with dirt, even though that dirt may not be harmful to the engine because it's not really going through it in the same way, it's still the same perspective. So by all means, filtration is very important, and we know the flexibility of water where we can somewhat, for lack of better words, deprogram it and reprogram it. And that's the whole point. If you can find a quality filter, now we have a nice clean hard drive on the computer to store information on where there's no fog, and structuring is an additive to the same thing. And like the mineral you talked about, the the minerals in that company where they put the minerals after. Well, that's exactly what we found out about the mineral supplement that we're going to be introducing. Is it enhances the structure in a natural way, which our company, doing basically a left-right vortex on the boundary layer. A lot of people don't understand that, but on the boundary layer, water cross flows or polarizes, and that's part of what increases its charge. And the spheres do that. It's literally like, we just discovered the wheel with water. Maybe 100 years ago, we knew about this, but it's relatively new as far as the common acceptance of people. And so 1, 2, 3 there is all adding to the structure of the water, to the overall vibration of the water. And we found the same thing, and it's Japanese minerals too. We mine them raw out of Japan, and they come over on a ship to the United States, and they go through a natural highly controlled washing process. And, we see each one of them adds a biological response. And I think we're trying to get some language here with the structured water, the filtration, what this all means, and a simple term, which, will soon be up on the website, probably within the next week, explaining all this terminology. And functional water has taken on the meaning that there is an improvement over, say, tap water or bottled water, what they call maybe bulk water. There's an improvement, a measurable improvement in biological response. Well, that means functional water is good filtration, good structuring practices. In my opinion, you cannot replace the desire to water to flow around left and right, in a toroidal motion. Will skip the complex mechanics of what goes on with, multiple spheres. It gets into supersonic nozzles and standing waves, and we've talked about it in the past. No big deal, but that's all going on in there. And then the final tail on it, with the minerals at a natural ratio, the way nature provides them, and really the only way the minerals are processed is basically washing them the most natural way possible. So only, what comes out is in solution. And so you just add a concentrated water solution to a finished water solution, start with a very clean water basis. And just like you, I've done some of the gravity filters and whatnot. And in the early stages, I thought they were okay. They were way better than the tap. And this is before I had structural water. And they even had magnetics. And after 2 months, I was going, man, this ain't as good. And after 6 months, I've always had a lot of animals, so I always used my animals. And the animals weren't even drinking the water anymore. They almost refused to drink it. And then I noticed when I structured the water out of the tap and didn't run it through the filter, the animals were drinking way more of it regular. And so these are some of the things, kind of to complement your nice opening there on the overall gist of things, which was very in depth. But real quick, let's take a step back, because I just for all of you who don't know, Kevin Trudeau started the Global Information Network, and it was kind of rumored to be a secret society of information, and hence the reason why Kevin Trudeau ended up in jail. I believe the guy deserves a blessing after what I just saw pop up online. I think it's a disgrace that there's any element of the human race, if that's what it is, that's going along with that. And that's all I want to say. Joe, you can kind of, take it from there and say what you want about it, after that.
Sure. Well, like I mentioned, it started when I was like 18 or so, and I read that book, Natural Cures. And for me, it was just so far outside of, again, like a lot of the information he said in there was not new per se. A lot of it was his personal story as well, and that was really cool. But as far as what, natural foods and the FDA, there was always kind of a pocket of people that were into organic stuff, these hippies. And I met people like that grew up from the 70s eating organic and drinking filtered water. So it's not like it was new stuff. But for a guy like me, I was just a regular person. I didn't know any of that. I never met anyone or heard of anything like that. I didn't know it existed.
So you're not a hippie?
I mean, I certainly don't like dress or look like one. Depending on who you ask, I eat like one.
I'm just playing.
But I didn't grow up in that world. I was just a totally normal person, and that was what was unique about it. I think was that exposed all that stuff, particularly about the government corruption with the medical industry and the food industry. The FTC from before that book was published was fighting a big war with him, going back to when he put out a product called Coral Calcium, which, if any of you are into the the natural health world at all, it's a really common supplement. He went on TV and sold it. He quoted like doctors that said, calcium deficiencies can be a contributing factor to cancer. And they're saying, well, the FTC said, you're implying that your product will cure cancer or prevent cancer. And all he was doing was quoting what a doctor said. It started with that, and even before that. So on the gin subject, my training in that club came from Kevin Trudeau. He authored all the material I went through, there was levels of training in that club. You had to qualify for the next level. At the time when Kevin Trudeau left, there was 6 levels out of a planned 12 that were completed. At the time I left the club, there was about 100 people that had passed all 6 levels, and I was one of them. I was also a member within that club of a kind of select group called the Inner Circle. We did some energetic work and consulting to help the club grow and kind of counteract the intentions of the people who didn't want people to be empowered. Basically, the agenda of the club that was Gin was to teach people how to use their minds and basically learn how to create their life they want using frequencies and their mind. And that material came from a group that Kevin got introduced to when he was 15. You hear different names in the media, and now it's almost like a fictitious, like mythological thing. People talk about the Illuminati and secret societies and whatnot. There's, History Channel shows about it. He did, for him, he said the group he got brought into when he was 15 and approached by when he was a bowling alley. You can buy the book Natural Cures. He talks about this. You can buy it on Amazon. It's a used copy. It's probably really cheap, but he talks about this story when he was 15 at a bowling alley, and some guys in suits came up and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "We've been watching you. You have some talents. We're in a club, and we'd like to bring you in this club. There's some terms about it. It's secret, and you'll be given a lot of knowledge of how to create money, wealth, health, anything you want in life. And in exchange, we're going to want some work from you based on the talents you have." That's how it started for him. And the training I got in Gin is that alleged material. No one was there to verify this. You could call it mythological or legendary in a way, that way. But I went through this material and I found it to be absolutely life-changing. It's teaching you how to take responsibility for what happens in your life and how to use your mind, particularly how to train your thinking, both conscious and unconscious thinking, to emit the proper frequencies that draws in the things you want in life. That's what the training is all about. There's really 2 end goals to that. It's number 1, and to me the most important thing, is feeling as good as possible all the time, or as much of the time as possible. And important, feeling good regardless of external conditions. I mean, I was in the hospital, in a very sick state, in the ICU, getting my first dialysis treatments. They had to cut open my neck and slide a catheter down my jugular vein. I mean, I went through some stuff, but I can tell you, and my parents and the doctors commented on this, is like, I just took it like this is what life is presenting to me right now, and I just accepted it, and I didn't have any sense of suffering through that. Yeah, there was some physical pain and inconvenience and discomfort, but there was no sense of suffering. And I attribute that to my Gin training. And throughout my whole dialysis process, there's been a lot of challenges, physically speaking, primarily. And my training has helped me deal with it, I think, pretty well. You'd have to ask the people I'm around all the time what they think. But I feel really good most of the time. Primarily, my challenges I deal with are physical in nature. And that does tend to throw off your thoughts. So those have been my primary challenges these days. But before I got into the Gin training, I had the emotional ups and downs, and life just kind of felt like an ongoing struggle. And I would have these dreams, but never felt like they were getting any closer. Or if I got a little closer, I would kind of unconsciously sabotage myself. There's what we call programs and patterns that the training helps eliminate. So that's what I went through. Basically, I quit school. I mean, I was in college on a 75% scholarship at the time I was doing this Gin training, and just looking around my classrooms and the teachers in college, and their life just didn't seem that good. They didn't. And looking at my classmates who were, joking around and not taking anything seriously, and I was getting A's and they were getting like B pluses. And I thought, man, for the amount of time I'm investing in this and the amount of money I'm investing in this, versus what I was doing at the same time, that Gin training and the events I traveled to around the world to take part in that training, as well as a lot of training at home via audios and books. I just felt like this was the real education for me, and I really dove into it hard, and couldn't be happier with that decision. And that, so all the material I learned comes from the group that, if you read the book Natural Cures by Kevin Trudeau, he talks about being brought in this group called the Brotherhood, and that is the material that I was trained in Jin. And yeah, it's a really interesting story. Hard to believe, hard to really kind of prove a lot of, like, if you haven't gone through it firsthand and experienced the benefits, difficult to communicate, I think, to some degree, how good it is. Kind of like structured water, you know. I mean, hard to, if someone's not really in tune with themselves energetically, hard to communicate, I think, to some degree, the benefits of structured water, you know. Uh, so it's like that. I've been really happy with that training. If anyone has any questions about it, would be happy to go into that. But it has to do with your thoughts and how that creates the life that you end up experiencing on a delay, of course. A lot of people, when I tell them that, ask, "Well, what about your kidney disease? Because did you end up creating that?" Or sometimes people will ask, "What about a kid that's born, with a disease at 3 weeks old and then dies at 4 weeks old? Like, how did they create that with their thoughts?" They're tough questions, but you know, maybe I'm going a little too abstract with this. Depending on what your views of life are, and your religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs, it can be hard to grasp. From my point of view, if you can imagine that, if you think we're just born and that's the beginning of our existence, I think those things are almost impossible to explain along these lines. If you can consider that, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience and that we existed before this physical embodiment, a little easier to understand, I think, why I might have created dialysis or kidney failure for myself, or other things like that. But that's the most common question I get when I talk about how much that training has benefited me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to that completely. I've been through the same type of questioning, and I put it like this: this lifetime and this physical manifest is more or less what we call touch and go on an aircraft carrier or a runway, where we just land and we're grounded for a short period of time, and that's it. And it's the experience you agree to have. It's not about whether it's perfect or right or wrong, whether you're wealthy, whether you're not wealthy. Those are all minimal constraints, in my opinion. It's exactly what you talked about, is how you receive your experience, and whether it's for 1 year before you're out of the womb, for 90 years, 50 lifetimes over, really doesn't matter. It's entirely about how you add to whatever type of experience. In other words, there's a baseline for what you're going to experience that you can't really change all that much. But what you can change is your perception of it and what you reflect back outward to other people in example. And, hardship is a part of everybody's life. I don't care who you are. And the more you can handle hardship, a lot of times the more you will receive hardship. I always tell people the universe doesn't give you anything that you can't handle, but it's always going to be at your threshold of challenge if that's what you're willing to receive. Other people, they want to tuck back and ride and watch some TV and kick back and lay on the beach, and that's about it, and that's the majority of their life, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has that experience. So you might have 10 hard lifetimes, whatever your being is, and then on 11 you want to take a break and chill out for a little bit. No different than we do for a couple hours of a day every now and then. It's when you take that perspective that it's the whole thing. So the mind is part of a total vibration, and then there's a heart vibration, but they're both very, very important, and they're both highly under taught, in my opinion. I'm, like you said, for me, I went into the military and to, type USAP programs, and, how they operate and how they accomplish things is just way beyond what the real world is aware of and think people are capable of. It's similar to like Navy SEALs type stuff, except they apply that philosophy to everything and anything. And then there's a whole nother part of the military that's just run of the mill. You wouldn't know the difference as part of normal society. And they both have their benefits. But when you come back out with these philosophies and then start to pick up on different versions of them, it's a whole new perspective. And at this time, I think we're getting into these types of things where the consciousness is raising, the effort required to do this kind of stuff is a bit less than it used to be, not so attacked and extreme, kind of like the principle of the movie Inception, where if you change things too much in your environment, the environment will turn around and attack you. And, I found like the movie Inception to be more real in concept in my life than in anything. And I keep that in mind that, hey, when I go into this scene, I'm not trying to disrupt the normal flow anymore. I'm just going to adjust for it. And I think water itself has a lot of beautiful lessons involved into that. And we'll go into we're going to go into a little bit more behind filter and filter quality now, because that's Joe's specialty. But the bottom line here is 18 cents a gallon is what you're going to pay for basically 10 years. Maybe it'll go longer with our devices, but we're kind of at a 10-year limit. At any rate, even that, the add of a new structuring unit to that factor is 0.000083 cents per gallon. It's nothing. It's the filtration and the minerals cost the most by far. But in the end, this is going to bring the most functional water I have seen to date on the average for about 18 cents a gallon. And from that, we'll jump into multi-pure a little bit. And Joe, how long have you been doing this? And tell us a little bit about multi-pure. Just real brief about the history and we know you've been into the filtration for quite a while, and just give us a little bit of background and then go into what we're looking at here. Why is multi-pure carbon filters different from what you're going to buy at Home Depot or even another carbon block filter from some other online company?
Yeah, Multi-Pure was actually the inventor of the solid carbon block filter. Prior to that, primarily carbon was always used in a granulated form. So it would be like a container full of loose carbon that the water would pass through. And the challenge with any granular media is what happens over time is the water will, by pressure, carve what are called channels through that media. And it will basically form like tiny river pathways where over time, more and more of the water is not getting filtered at all. It's just passing through these channels and passing out the other side of the filter. So to get around that and get the maximum result from the carbon itself, which is a really good media for water filtration, Multi-Pure invented the first solid carbon block. And over the years, refined it. And to this day, are one of the leading solid carbon block manufacturers in the world, not just from their retail line, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, but for private labels, industrial purposes, commercial purposes. They're a huge player. They have over 300 employees, and all these units are made in the USA. I've personally been to the company headquarters. Just a great company, great people, real science. I mean, I know that's probably everyone will hear, maybe not your favorite subject, but I've been to the factory, or I haven't been to the factory building. I've been to the headquarters, and they have a lab with like the kind of door you see at like a radiation clinic for cancer, like one of those real heavy lead doors, and with a tiny window you can see through, and there's scientists and lab coats working back there doing tests. So it's the real deal.
Let me jump in real quick on the science, because I feel the need to repeat this because of let's put it this way. When we talk about science, I think we really mean institution when most people are talking about science. And I want to be clear that, I've always been true to what I call the art of science, which means it's not so objective as people think. It's very much an art form. And really the definition of it, and I think we need to clarify with people on this, when they say there's no science, we need to bring up, what is your definition of science? Because most people can't give you a definition of science. And if you look up the definition, it's the observation of nature in a systematic manner, which all that means is you're observing nature with no preconception. You're not putting a set of rules to it. and you're writing down the specific way you did your observations so they can be repeated by other people. That's science. And what we're getting is, has this been peer reviewed? By who? Science that says this isn't possible, that's not science. That's an institution. And I just want to make that very clear. It's the same thing Kevin Trudeau went through. So just, a lot of this crowd doesn't like the term science, but what they really don't like is institution. Just like Krishnamurti, the institution is the problem. The stuck, rigid, logical, quagmire that people refer to that call them scientists, and that is not science. So to give you some sympathy there, like, there is good people out there who conduct good science who aren't part of institution. And the biggest science there is the observation of self. And I just want to throw that in there before we kind of get too scientific about the rest of it, but go ahead and keep rolling.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I look at it like this. When I think of science, I think of things that can be quantified or measured, or like you said, observed, and repeatedly. But I think everyone on here would agree. There's things about structured water that we all feel and experience that we can't quantify yet. I mean, I can't really quantify why I feel so good from the natural action devices. And I mean, I'm sure you all are aware there's other players in the structured water market now. And I've bought in other devices that, when you read about them and you look at them, everything looks really good and sounds really good. And then I try them, and then there's just a strong discord in my body. I can't quantify that yet. Like, I don't know how to measure that or relay that to somebody who thinks in quantifiable terms. The cool thing about filtration is that it is quantifiable. And so you don't really have to have that, you don't have to have that gap there with people. Our products, like, I would say disproportionately, we sell a lot of them to labs, doctors' offices, dentists' offices, things like that, with people who, are data driven. And I think there is something to that, because it does, for the things you can measure, it takes a lot of the debate out of the picture, So it's really straightforward that way. The challenge we get with those of us that are sensitive and everyone that loves structured water is there are a lot of benefits that we can't quantify yet. That gap between what we can feel and sense and what we can quantify, I think when that gap gets closed over time, kind of the gap between spirituality or intuitiveness and science, when that gap gets closed over time, I think that'll be when a big stage of evolution occurs for the human race. But as for right now, when it comes to filters, things are quantifiable. The challenge is with a lot of contaminants, and you can see on that contaminant reduction list, with a lot of these things, you can alter tests with a filter that in real life would never be able to remove these things to a significant degree and make it look like it does. The gravity filters, I don't want to say any other brand names, but the gravity filters I mentioned, a lot of stuff that's out there is not tested to what you see on here, this NSF certification. NSF is an international nonprofit, and they set up protocols for testing water filters for huge array of contaminants. These contaminants are a big chunk of that list. They're not all of them, but there's a huge list of contaminants you can get tested for. Every single contaminant has its own protocol. The protocol specifies the concentration of the contaminant in the water that gets tested and the chemistry of the water, the durability and the quality of construction of the housing of the filter. There's a lot of variables in this NSF protocol, and they all have to be matched or passed to get a certification from them. And it's really difficult. I mean, out of all the water filters I see on the market, very few are NSF certified. The majority that are NSF certified are only certified for chlorine or just chlorine and a couple things. The Brita filters we all see on TV all the time, and the pure filters that mount on your faucet are NSF certified, but just not for much. Chlorine, I think the Pure has one that's certified for lead now. Lead, for example, to be certified for lead, you have to pass your testing at water that's both at a 6.5 pH and an 8.5 pH, because the pH of the water can really affect the absorption capacity of lead. So that range is kind of the whole range you would see in most tap water. So if you're on both ends of the spectrum, you can pass, then you've passed. Um, another cool thing about the NSF testing is every contaminant on that list you see, you have to pass you have to pass the testing for that protocol at twice your system's rated capacity. Our best-selling system is called the Aquaversa, and it's rated for 750 gallons. So that means every contaminant on this list, with the exception of arsenic, the Aquaversa doesn't do arsenic. Only the higher-end filters do that. But every other filter, every other contaminant on that list, it passed testing for at least 1,500 gallons. So it's certified for 750. It passed every single thing on that list besides arsenic for 1,500. They cut it in half just to add like a layer of redundancy. And the other thing is, every one of those contaminants, the concentration they're tested in is usually at least twice what the EPA considers dangerous. Sometimes it's 5 times or more. So they add these multiple layers of redundancy, and then you have to pass for twice your system's rated capacity. And there's specified chemistry for every one of these tests. Between all these things, you have a really good indicator of whether it will remove this thing in real life. So that's the high bar of integrity that MultiPure and every NSF certified system uses. MultiPure was one of the first NSF certified systems, and to this day, if you go on the NSF database, you can click and search by contaminants. You can click, chloramine, chlorine, lead, mercury, MTBE. You can put in a combination, and it'll show you every system that tests that matches all those things. And if you put in all these things listed on here, every single system that can remove all these things is made by MultiPure. The only systems that remove anything more than these things are reverse osmosis. And reverse osmosis has a lot of downsides. And I find a lot of people in the structured water world don't want to have anything to do with it unless you're in an extreme water situation where the water is just so bad that there's no other choice besides reverse osmosis. And that does come up from time to time. But anything besides that, I think you'd be better off with one of these systems. The reverse osmosis systems, they waste a lot of water. To get 1 gallon of good water that you can drink, usually you're wasting, it depends on the system and depends on the source water, between 2 and 3, sometimes 4 or 5 or more gallons of wasted water. So you get 1 gallon of good water, you're wasting a few gallons of wastewater that just goes down the drain. Plus the water you get is acidic and it's mineral deficient. And contrary to popular belief, not everything is taken out with reverse osmosis. So for a lot of reasons, I see a lot of people, especially in the functional water world, not just structured water, but everybody who wants to do something more for their water than just filtering. I find there's a general shift away from reverse osmosis. And if you're looking for something that's really, really good and you can depend on, but still leaves the minerals in the water, doesn't waste any water, these by far, I think, are the best on the market. I'm always looking at the market to see if there's anything else out there. But this contaminant reduction list of NSF certified contaminants, I haven't seen anything that comes close to that. Our best-selling system is the Aquaversa. If you remember Consumer Reports, the Aquaversa is the #1 rated below sink water filter on Consumer Reports. You can see it over there on the right side. That's the bestseller by far. It's just the best bang for the buck. The base system's $385. Usually when you get an installation kit, which is $45, either countertop below sink, and if you add on like tax and shipping, usually it's in the like $420 to $450 ballpark, depending on what you need. That's where most people end up with everything. But at that price point, there isn't anything else on the market that comes anywhere near that list of contaminants it reduces. The Aquaperform and the Aqualux you see right there, they're definitely higher end machines. The Aquaperform removes all the same contaminants as the Aquaversa plus arsenic. The arsenic is key because there's only a few systems besides reverse osmosis that have ever passed NSF testing for arsenic. And these two, the Aqualux and the Aquaperform, they're the main two. There's some other, private labeled versions of that for other countries and stuff that MultiPure makes, but every single filter on the market that's ever passed NSF testing for arsenic, that's not reverse osmosis, is made by MultiPure. So that's the benefit with the AquaPerform. It's also larger, so you get a better flow rate through it. Some people use ionizers. They like the AquaPerform because it gets a better flow rate through it. The Aqualux is what I'm going to be going to when I get a kidney transplant. It takes out all the same stuff as the AquaPerform, including arsenic, but it also has this military grade developed mesh wrapped around the filter that gets total reduction of like untraceable levels of bacteria and virus reduction. So because I'm going to be immunosuppressed when I take, get my kidney transplant, I have to take this medicine that suppresses my immune system for the rest of my life. I'm going to be going to an Aqualux because just in the odd chance that some bacteria, even with chlorine disinfection, gets into the water, you'll be totally safe with an Aqualux. It's something to think about for you guys. If I know that Jonathan's told me about some of the history with the company and a general prevailing belief that structuring the water would basically do the filtering for you to some degree, or render the things that are in the water that are harmful basically totally harmless for you. But think about the fact that your body still has to work to get that stuff out. A guy like me, I could never get that out because my kidneys don't work. So it would just be accumulating. And so for anyone like that has severe health conditions or anything, the Aqualux is a really good option. It is pricey. It's over $1,000. So it's the highest end unit. It's a little more sleek in the design. It's based off the technology that MultiPure sells to the military, where they use this same nano mesh where they can throw a hose in like a putrid pond with, fecal matter and viruses, like the worst water source you can imagine, out in the field in the military. And they filter through a similar type unit as the Aqualux, and they have potable water on demand. So you can imagine the requirements to sell to the military, something like that, is very rigid. And the Aqualux was based off technology they developed for that. It's just a scaled down version of it for, a household setting. But yeah, for most people, the Aquaversa is by far the most popular unit. It's really good bang for the buck. The replacement filters are reasonable. They're $70. They're once a year for most people. Sometimes I talk to, fanatical water people like me. I recommend twice a year because if you're like me, you use so much water, not just for drinking, but for, watering plants and washing your produce and everything. So someone like me, I use a lot of water. I do twice a year, but most people, they change them once a year. And like I said, that's rated for 750 gallons. That's about, maybe if you were two people living in a situation, that's probably about what you would go through in a year. If you have a family of 4 or 5 or more, maybe you go twice a year on those replacement filters. You can see the AquaPerform, even though it's bigger and it removes all the same contaminants plus the arsenic, because of that arsenic. Remember what I was saying about the NSF testing? You have to pass for twice the capacity. So you'll see the filter capacity is 600 gallons on that instead of 750. And that's because the arsenic is so hard to remove from water that we can pass for 1,200 gallons only. So they cut that number in half down to 600 gallons. If you didn't have arsenic in your water and you just wanted a bigger flow rate because the AquaPerform is bigger, you would get obviously more capacity out of that. Yeah, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and chat. Type them. Do you have any thoughts, Jonathan?
Well, I think our thing overall is just to focus on the best water quality possible. And that's what we're really starting to focus on. Back to, I always tell the story about I was 24 years old the first time I drank good water from a natural source, and I knew it, and I kind of had a smirk on my face, and I felt like the horse next to me drinking the same water had a smirk for me too, because that horse wasn't getting fed good water from down low in the barn. And I just thought it was kind of comical situation that here we are, human beings living on Earth, and most of us are never going to have real water. At the time when I was 24, I didn't really see myself as part of being a solution to it, or anybody else for that matter, because I didn't hear about anybody doing anything. And, ironically or not, here we are, 20 years later, And that's the goal here is whatever we can do cost effectively. I'm no stranger to it, but I knew the filters that were out there weren't very good. So I'm real happy you guys have an easy system where we can bring this on. The company talked about going into, filtration manufacture to combine them with our units numerous times throughout its history. And, we just decided that, we haven't been doing it. Structured water, we have a reasonable history as far as the industry of everybody being involved in it. And that's where we want to keep our focus. And the study of the water itself, not so much the equipment that makes it, maybe except for the structuring, or the natural technologies or minerals or frequencies or vibrations we put in it. So that's about all I have to say about it. I'm happy to represent, and I'm happy to be able to offer it to people who feel it's necessary. Again, the cost, between the minerals, which I believe is once you get to understanding the minerals further and what that means for DNA, according to the newest science, and what that means for the biology of the soil. That's the first place we discovered it was the trace minerals, were trace minerals, and calcium in particular were calcium being a macronutrient, not so much trace, but that one macronutrient in particular, and the trace elements that you can't even really measure at natural ratios were the key to the air and the soil that was coming down throughout all of it. And worse yet, if the water wasn't good, the assimilation of these nutrients wasn't very good neither. And when you get the nutrients working right in the soil, the trace elements or the water, and you mix it with structuring, it's all synergizing. So I look forward to the time when we're not combating, so much, getting away from the bad stuff and talking about, making the good stuff is the primary focus. But I do believe these filters are a great foundation for it. There's some downsides to water softeners that are pretty significant. There's downsides to RO, as Joe mentioned, and looking at all those different pieces, it's like, okay, we got the 1, 2, 3 punch here to do the real mission statement to bring high quality spring water to people on the widest basis. There's going to be some people who prefer other things. It's just like cars, just like you said, the structured water units, there's units that are good for some people that aren't going to be good for others. And it's not because they don't work. As we talked about, I just came across a situation where too much structuring was not good. And so we're trying to find that balance that works for everybody. And
I'd like to add something to that, Jonathan.
Yeah, rock on.
One thing I find in talking with a lot of people that are in the structured water like me is it's hard to communicate this, I think, for a lot of people, but they don't want a filter that they feel will kind of reduce or inhibit the effects of the structuring. They may have, like, for example, if they have a whole house system for the structuring, and then they have, a portable unit, like as a last line, they don't want any kind of deterioration, or at least to mitigate that, any kind of deterioration you would get from the filtration process. And again, that is hard to quantify, but I can just tell you, from me and the people I've talked to that have used this in conjunction with the NAT devices, they feel that these systems are passive in that way. They don't seem to do. I mean, I think anytime you're forcing water through micropores like this, you're going to have some effect on the structure, and hard to know exactly what that is and to what degree that might mitigate the positive effects that from any structuring beforehand. But just from my experience and the people I've talked to that have used these two in conjunction, is it's passive in that way, it seems. Comment that it doesn't add, like some people said that other filters for them added this sterile energy or sterile taste to it, and they didn't sense that with the multi-pure. So just wanted to throw that in there. There's been some users already that have been very happy with this.
The way these carbon block filters are manufactured are different than other carbon block filters, right?
Yeah, most carbon blocks on the market are what's called extruded. That means basically the binding material, which is like polyethylene in most cases, is chopped up and mixed with carbon, and then forced through a heated, pressurized tube, basically, that gradually spews out just melted together solid block. That's how they all were in the beginning. Multi-pure, unlike the majority of carbon blocks on the market, and I can't even think of another one made in the USA that does like this, is compressed. So they're one at a time, like pressurized. And the difference is you can use a lot less of the binding material. So you get a much higher carbon to binding material ratio in the block. And you just get better consistency with the pore sizes. You get a lot more flexibility with the recipe, so to speak, because it's not just carbon; it's mixed media. Like just regular carbon by itself won't remove lead, for example. The heavy metals in particular are challenging. So it's a blend of materials. There's a lot more flexibility and ability to add other ingredients with the compressed carbon blocks. A lot more quality control. It is more labor intensive, and that's why it's not that common, because it's just more laborious to make them like this. But the quality is multi-pure's focus, and that's why there's not anything else in the NSF database, carbon block or otherwise, that's getting as many contaminants as these blocks do.
Yep. It's a totally different process, which expresses the quality of the situation. Like I said, I think we may have a micropore situation where we may actually be structuring water to some degree as it goes through. Most of the time, the company's always supported filtration, and we just say to structure, always structure last, and that way any vibrations and all the theory and all the evidence to support, the crystal liquid structure and the memory, which, to me is knowledge for me based on my research, even though it's a little complex to prove out in there's no system to say, hey, this is a 9.2, because once it's an on or off is over, then it's a degree of. And my pathway with the company and with the structured water industry is we need to go to degree of now. It's not an on or off thing anymore. The on or off part, yeah, we get. It's a degree of, and so that means new instrumentation and measurement, and nothing in science or nothing observed is purely quantifiable. Everything's about qualitative, and as you said, I don't know how to quantify, the fact that I feel better, that is the quantification. Do you feel better or worse? It's yes or no. That's the simplest of science. And that's the most important part, is that everybody have the freedom to make their own judgment and look at all the information without getting shortchanged. Joe, if you want to close out with anything while we wait a couple seconds, happy to. Otherwise, I thank everybody for committing to a Friday evening again and getting involved in this. And perhaps you all are much more important part of this than any of the rest of us, and helping water, to be what it can be.
Couple thoughts to close. One thing I've done with people to show structured water, the benefit of it is, I have my multi-pure right on the countertop, and I get water right out of it, and I let someone taste. This is what I did for my dad. He wasn't the kind of person that was going to be interested in structured water. He's just a regular guy. But I just took water out of my multi-pure. He tasted it, tasted good, because, the filtration does a lot for the taste, among other things. And then I took that same water and in front of him passed it through the portable NAT device. And he could taste the difference. And what he said was it felt lighter on it, like it felt like softer on his mouth and his tongue. Something with the surface tension or something. So he could palpably notice a difference. So something to that, as far as, maybe not all of you want to offer filtration, but something to think about for that. I did want to throw my contact info out there if you guys want to get in touch with me, if you have any questions, if you were interested in adding this to your lineup. There's a direct sales opportunity with this where you don't have to hold any inventory. And the commissions are, really generous, and just a great company to do business with. So, NAT's partnering. I'm working with NAT, and I can, collaborate with you on that basis. You can email me at joe@vortexpure.com, JOE@vortexpure, one word.com, or you can call me at 443-416-7565, 443-416-7565. And even if you just want to say hi or whatever, if you have any questions about anything I talked about, including, my health or the Kevin Trudeau stuff, which I know a lot about, be be happy to talk to you. I don't know if everyone in here is aware, but the study that NAT is helping fund over in Manchester, UK, is about taking that dialysate that washes people's blood on dialysis and structuring it. Still the same RO water, still mineral balance to the proper levels for dialysis, and then structuring that water. And the idea is, most people in dialysis are not like me. They feel really bad most of the time. They're lethargic. They have cramps all over their body all the time, especially when they're getting dialysis. So they want to improve those people's quality of life. I do a lot to try to mitigate those things, and so I feel pretty good. But if we can structure that water while it's that comes in physical contact with the blood, the idea is, will that reduce some of the negative side effects of dialysis? And I'm so thrilled about that, and I can't wait to see the results of that study. But to me, that's just a really great application of structured water.
Once we get to the degree of, or the finite quality, that's where we lose quantification. I mean, it's not just water, it's not just filters, it's life itself, where you cannot logically go through life 100%. And in all reality, the human intuition and the heart, is better. If you had to think about how to play music, you would never succeed in being a good musician. And to me, that's a perfect example. You're trying to build harmony, and you cannot calculate how to build harmony and creativity. And that's the bottom line. So I thank you so much for your time, Joe. I look forward to having a healthy relationship, and I'm sure you will. We got common goals on how to serve people and help out with the evolution of our own existence as a being on the planet. And want to thank everybody for giving up their Friday evening. Everybody go have fun and enjoy dinner or whatever it is you're going to do, and have a great weekend. And Joe, I'm sure we'll have you on again, and we'll have new stuff to share.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Yep, thank you. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Okay.